He thought his badge made him untouchable, until he brought the wrong woman to court. That line alone was enough to turn heads in a small town where justice often felt like a coin toss. People whispered about officers who wore their uniforms like armor and treated others like they were beneath them. But no one expected what happened when Officer Grant decided to flex his authority on the wrong person. This wasn't just another story about arrogance and power. It was a story about truth, courage, and a woman who refused to bow down, even when the odds were stacked against her. Officer Grant had spent 15 years on the force, his reputation a mix of respect and fear. To many, he was the hero who showed up when trouble hit. To others, he was the nightmare in uniform, quick to intimidate, quick to silence anyone who dared to challenge him. He believed the badge on his chest gave him the right to write his own rules. His word was law, and who would dare question law itself? Yet power has a way of blinding a man, and Grant's pride often left bruises on the lives of those he thought too small to matter. On a chilly Friday evening, fate introduced him to a woman who was nothing like his usual targets. Her name was Elena Martinez. A quiet single mother, she worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and dreamed only of giving her young daughter a future, untouched by the struggles she carried herself. She was careful, polite, never one to stir trouble. But on that night, her old car broke down at the edge of Main Street. Officer Grant pulled up, lights flashing, not to help but to harass. He claimed she was blocking traffic, ignoring the fact that she had her hazards on and was waiting for a tow truck. When Elena tried to explain, his voice thundered over hers. He wrote her a ticket laced with contempt, then made a remark cruel enough to cut through her chest. People like you never learn until someone makes you. Most would have swallowed the insult, taken the ticket, and carried on. Elena didn't. Something inside her refused to bow. She looked at him, eyes steady but voice trembling, and said, "You may have a badge, but you don't have the right to treat me like I don't matter. I'll see you in court." That spark was the beginning of something Grant never imagined. His authority being dragged under the unforgiving light of truth. The court date came sooner than expected. Grant walked into the room with swagger, uniform pressed, badge gleaming, certain of victory. After all, he had won countless times before. His testimony always carried more weight than the trembling voices of ordinary citizens. Judges nodded. Lawyers folded. People left feeling smaller than when they entered. Why should today be any different? But sitting at the opposite table was Elena, not dressed in fear but in quiet dignity. She wasn't alone. A few neighbors had come to support her, their silent presence reminding Grant of something he hadn't faced before. Witnesses who weren't afraid. Elena stood to speak. Her words weren't loud, but they were clear, steady as stone. She described everything, every detail, and she carried herself not as a victim, but as someone demanding respect. She even brought the tow truck driver as a witness, who confirmed her car had indeed broken down. The room grew still as her story unfolded, weaving truth with the kind of honesty that cannot be faked. Grant felt a flicker of unease. For the first time, his badge seemed a little less shiny. When it was his turn, he spoke with the arrogance of a man too used to winning. He painted her as careless, as irresponsible, using his authority as paint and his badge as brush. But something about his tone fell flat against the honesty that lingered from Elena's words. The judge watched closely, weighing the contrast between intimidation and integrity. For once, the scales of justice felt balanced. The ruling was swift, shocking to those who had watched years of Grant's unchecked dominance. The ticket was dismissed. The judge reprimanded the officer, noting the unnecessary hostility in his conduct. Elena didn't smile in triumph. She didn't need to. Her silence carried more weight than celebration. Grant's face burned with humiliation, his authority dented in public for the first time. He stormed out of the courtroom, his steps heavy, as though each one carried the weight of a crumbling crown. But the story didn't end there. Grant thought humiliation was the worst outcome, but Elena's courage inspired others. More voices began to rise, stories of his intimidation and abuse trickled out like cracks in a dam. People who had been silent for years found strength in her example. One by one, complaints were filed. Investigations began. The badge that once shielded him now became a target for accountability. Elena returned home that evening, holding her daughter close. She whispered, "Never let anyone make you feel small." Tears filled her eyes, not from pain but from relief. She had stood her ground, not just for herself but for every person who had been silenced before her. In the end, Officer Grant learned the hardest lesson of his life, that no badge, no power, no title makes a person untouchable. Respect cannot be forced, and justice cannot be bent forever. And Elena, she became the quiet symbol of resilience, proof that courage doesn't always roar. It sometimes stands tall in the courtroom, speaks softly, and changes everything. The message that lingered was clear. Power without humility crumbles, but truth spoken with courage endures forever. And as long as there are voices brave enough to rise, no one, not even the untouchable, remains beyond accountability.